We've had CAFTA, and some of my members called TPP Shafta, because we knew what it was going to do to them. And let me also say this. Look at the people here. Look at the people in this audience. And there's crowds like this all over the country. There are many that are saying we can't win this campaign. There are many that are saying it can't be done. But I don't believe that. I believe with the numbers we have today, and with the energy that's in this room today, and the energy in Dallas on today when he spoke to almost 8,000 people, you can make the difference. You can make the difference. So it is with great honor to introduce the man who dedicates his every waking hour to standing up for working people, the middle class. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you United States Senator Bernie Sanders. And let's get
people have said to me recently, they said, you know, Bernie, you are running for president of the United States of America, but you must not be a very smart politician. You know, you're running in the Democratic primary process. Why in God's name would you come to Texas? Texas has a conservative Republican governor, two Republican senators. The vast majority of the congressional delegation from Texas is conservative Republican. The legislature is overwhelmingly Republican. Don't you know, Bernie, this is a conservative Republican state. And my answer to those questions is, yes, I do know that this is a conservative Republican state, and that is exactly why I am here. This is a conservative Republican state, but that doesn't mean it will be conservative Republican tomorrow. And with the energy I see in and tomorrow we're going to transform. But in a serious tone, the reason I am here, and the reason that next month I'm going to be going to Alabama, to Mississippi, to some very conservative states, is for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is wrong for the Democratic Party, in my view, to surrender half of the states in America. Democratic Party must establish a 50-state strategy, including the state of Texas, and start putting the Republicans on the defensive. The simple truth is that you cannot be a national political party which claims to represent working families and low-income people and turn your back on some of the poorest states in America. I'm here to tell you that when 26% of the children in Texas live in poverty, we are not going to abandon those kids. When 24% of the people in Texas have no health insurance, we are not going to abandon those kids. When 168,000 people in Texas are incarcerated, we are not going to abandon those people. And when workers in Texas still make a $7.25 an hour minimum wage, we are going to stand with those workers. As Claude mentioned to you, I have had a long political career, and throughout my political life, I have taken on virtually every powerful special interest in this country. And many of them hate my guts, and I welcome their hatred. But this is what I do not like, and that is in your state and in my state, and in states all over this country, we continue to have working class and low-income people voting against their own best interests. Talk to our friends and people who look at the world the way we do. That's kind of natural. But I'm asking you to go outside of your zone of comfort. I'm asking you to talk to your Republican friends and family members and co-workers. And I want you to ask them this. Many of those Republicans are working class, low-income people. And I want you to tell them about the Republican budget that passed the United States Congress a few months ago, and you ask them whether they think that makes sense. Ask them whether they think it makes sense that we make massive cuts in Medicare and Medicaid. Ask them if they think it makes sense that we cut $90 billion from Pell Grants over a 10-year period. At a time when millions of families in my state here in Texas are struggling to put food on the table, the Republican budget made billions of dollars in cuts in nutrition programs, including the WIC program, a program for low-income pregnant women. Ask them if they think that makes sense. And then ask them whether it makes sense to support a Republican Party which is determined to send their jobs to low-wage countries around the world. And then on top of all of that, the Republican budget gave hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top two-tenths of 1%. So our job is to reach out to our Republican brothers and sisters, working class people and middle class people, and get their heads right so they don't keep voting for people who are working day and night against their interests and their kids' interests. You know, politics is really not all that complicated. Media makes it a little bit complicated, but it really is not. What politics in a democratic society is about is a people coming together and saying, okay, what are our problems? How do we resolve them? Politics is not a baseball game about how much money this or that candidate raises. It is not a soap opera about somebody's personal life. It is not before coming off of this podium, I will have full knowledge that will be on the front page of the paper. What politics is about is determining how we go forward to improve the lives of our people. Simply and straightforwardly, nothing fancy about it, is lay some of the issues out on the table that I believe are the most important issues facing the American people. And let me start with the issue of income and wealth inequality. Now, this, in fact, is an issue that I've been talking about for many years, and I'm happy to see more discussion about this issue. And here is the story. Today in the United States of America, we live in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. But very few people understand that because almost all of the wealth rests in the hands of a very few people. America today has more wealth and income inequality than any other major country on earth. You know, you think the United Kingdom, with their queens and their dukes and their lords, that they have more income and wealth inequality? Wrong. We do. And it is worse today. The gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is wider today than at any time since 1928. The issue of income and wealth inequality, when you think about it, is the great moral issue of our time. It is the great economic and political issue of our time. Now here's why it is the great moral issue of our time. We have got to ask ourselves as Americans whether we are satisfied in living in a country in which there has been in recent years a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires at the same time as we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. Is that the America we want? In America today, the top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Is that the America that we want to see? Today in America, we have one family that owns Walmarts. That one family owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. One family. In the last 2 years, the wealthiest 14 people in this country, saw an increase in their wealth of $157 billion, more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million Americans. In my view, that is not what this country should be looking about, and together, you and I are going to change that. This campaign, singularly, is sending a message to the billionaire class. And that message is, you can't have it all. You cannot get huge tax breaks, and we have some major corporations in this country who make billions and do not pay a nickel in federal taxes. You cannot get huge tax breaks when children in this country go hungry. You cannot continue to send our jobs to China when millions of people in this country desperately need work. You cannot hide your profits, your billions in profits, in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, and other tax havens where we have enormous unmet needs in this country. Loudly and as clearly as we can, their greed has got to end. Their greed is destroying this country, and we are going to end their greed for them. Moral and responsible Americans. But the issue that we face economically is not just the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. Every month, a report comes out from the federal government talking about unemployment. And what the report talks about is official unemployment, which is now about 5.3%. There is another report that comes out from the federal government which adds those people who have given up looking for work and those millions of people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. And when you add those numbers together, real unemployment in America is 10.5%. And now let me tell you something that we don't discuss at all, and that is the crisis of youth unemployment. We don't talk about it at all. It is a national tragedy. If you are a kid who graduated high school and you are between 17 years of age and 20 years of age, if you are a white kid, your unemployment rate is 33%. If you are an Hispanic kid, your unemployment rate is 36%. If you are an African American kid, your unemployment rate is 51%. In other words, we are turning our backs on an entire generation of young people. And if anybody thinks that that reality of outrageously high unemployment is unrelated to the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth, you would be mistaken. President Obama last week did something that I thought was very, very brave. He was the first president, as I understand it, in the history of our country to walk into a federal penitentiary. And the reasons he did that were, first of all, to point out how many of our people are in jail. To ask the question why in this country we have more people in jail than an authoritarian communist country like China. And the second point that he wanted to make is that those people in jail are disproportionately minorities, African Americans, Hispanics, and other minorities. Those are the points that he wanted to make. In my very strong opinion, when we see so many of our young people hanging out on street corners without the education they need, when we see so many of our people in jail, to me it makes eminent sense that we should be investing in jobs and education rather than jails and incarceration. Where we have not the most people in jail of any country, but the best educated population of any country. But when we talk about the economy, we're not just talking about the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. We're not just talking about unemployment and youth unemployment. We are also talking about the reality that in Texas, in Vermont, all over this country, millions of people are working for extraordinarily low wages. So let me be as clear to you as I can. When we have, throughout America, people working not just one job, but 2 jobs, 3 jobs, because the wages they're making are not enough for them to adequately take care of their families. What we must understand is that the federal and Texas minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage which must be raised. Should be raised to $15 an hour. It is not a radical idea to say that if somebody in America works 40 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty. That's not a radical. Your help, because it is wrong, indefensible that women make 78 cents on the dollar.
Bernie!
Earning the same amount as men, and that is why we need to pass pay equity legislation. I know that here in Texas there are many Republicans who talk about family values. This is what they mean by family values. They mean that women should not be able to control their own bodies. I disagree. They mean, if you can believe this, it's hard to believe, but it's true, that women should not be able to buy the contraceptives they need. I disagree. And they mean that our gay brothers and sisters should not be able to get married as heterosexual couples are. I disagree. Let me tell you what I think are real family values. Values based on love, not hatred. The important family values that we have to strive for is for the United States to end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth which does not guarantee workers paid medical and family leave. In Texas today, in Vermont today, all over this country, women are giving birth to babies. And for that woman, this is an extraordinarily important moment. And for the baby, it's pretty important too. But here's the story. If that woman comes from a family which has decent income, she can spend weeks and months getting to know and to love and be comfortable with her baby, and the dad can do that as well. But if that woman does not have adequate income, she will be forced to go back to work in 5 days or 7 days or 8 days. That is not a family value. That is the opposite. for 12 weeks of paid family leave. Here's another family value. Today, a child is sick, but the mom or the dad does not have paid sick time, and that child may be forced to go to school, even though he or she should not. We are the only major country on earth that does not guarantee paid sick time. That has got to end. That Jeb Bush believes that the American people should be working harder, should be working longer hours. Apparently, Governor Bush does not know that the American people today, as a result of the collapse of our middle class, are working the longest hours of any major country on earth. The Japanese, very hard workers, we work longer hours than they do. Some of you, I know, have read in textbooks where workers 100 years ago, remember the pictures? Workers 100 years ago were demonstrating out on the streets, and they held up these huge placards and signs, and they said, 100 years ago, they said, we want a 40-hour work week. What they said is, we are not beasts of burden. We want time with our families, we want time for education. That is what they said 100 years ago. And today, with all of the new technology, with all of the increase in worker productivity, 85% of working men and 66% of working women are working more than 40 hours a week. I get around the country, I get around my own state of Vermont, and I look into people's eyes. People are tired. People are exhausted. People are working 2 jobs, they're working 3 jobs. And yet we are the only major country that doesn't guarantee workers paid vacation time, and that has got to end. People deserve some time to spend with their kids and their family. They don't have to work all of the time. When posters go out and they ask the American people, and they say, what is uppermost on your mind? The answer almost always comes down to jobs. That's what people say. What's on your mind? Jobs. Why is that? Well, because if you are 55 or 60, you're worried that you can be fired tomorrow and have somebody replace you at half your age and half the wages. If you are a young person, graduating high school or college, you know how hard it is to find a job. If you're a worker going into a factory, you worry that your boss may tell you tomorrow, well, I'm sorry, we're going to shut down and we're moving to China. The truth is that we need in this country a massive federal jobs program to create millions of jobs. our water systems, our wastewater plants, our levees, our dams, all of them are crumbling and are very, very bad shape. The American Society of Civil Engineers tells us we need to invest over $3 trillion on our infrastructure. I have introduced legislation that in the next 5 years would put $1 trillion into rebuilding our crumbling roads and bridges. And that legislation would create 13 million decent paying jobs. Not only do we have to create jobs, but we have to save jobs. And Claude, who introduced me, raised a very, very important issue. For the young people in this room, let me tell you something that will shock you and surprise you. There was once a time in America where you could walk into a store and actually purchase products made in the United States of America. I know you don't believe me, but that's true. But what happened over a period of years is that the large multinational corporations and Wall Street came together and they said, look, why do we want to pay a worker in Texas or Vermont 20, 25 bucks an hour? Why do we want to provide health care to that worker? Why do we have to deal with unions? Why do we have to obey environmental regulations? Hey, let's shut down here, even if we're profitable, and we'll move to some low-wage country. We'll pay people 50 cents an hour, and we'll bring the products back into America. And that is basically what our trade policy has been for 40 years. And that is why I have voted against NAFTA, against CAFTA, and against why I will continually help lead the opposition against this Trans-Pacific Partnership. When we use the words like greed, recklessness, illegal behavior, these are just a few of the words we use to describe Wall Street. Wall Street today, the 6 major financial institutions on Wall Street have assets today of about $10 trillion. That is equivalent to 60% of the gross domestic product of the United States of America. As all of you remember, in 2007, 2008, the greed of Wall Street, the illegal behavior of Wall Street drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Millions of people lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost their life savings. Today, many of these very same Wall Street institutions are bigger now than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail. In my very strong opinion, we have got to bring back legislation called Glass-Steagall. Investor banks and commercial banks and insurance companies to merge. And the other thing that we have got to do even more significantly is we have got to break up these large financial institutions. If a bank is too big to fail In other words, if a bank needs to be saved and bailed out by the taxpayers of this country, if that bank is too big to fail, that bank is too big to exist.
And that is, as a result of the disastrous Supreme Court decision in the Citizens United case. That's right. As a result of that 5-4 decision, what the Supreme Court essentially said to the wealthiest people in this country, what they said is, hey guys, you own much of the economy. Now we are going to give you the opportunity to purchase the United States government. That's what they said. And that is exactly what is happening right now. What we are seeing is a situation where, among others, the Koch brothers, the second wealthiest family, doesn't talk about it very much, but this is a family who are determined not to cut Social Security, but to end Social Security, to end Medicare, to end Medicaid, to end the protection agency. This one family has pledged to spend close to $1 billion in this election cycle. $1 billion. This is more money than will be spent by either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. When you have one family spending more money than either of the two major political parties, that is not democracy, that is oligarchy. That any nominee that I make to the United States Supreme Court will in fact have to pass a litmus test. And that litmus test is that that man or woman will say loudly and clearly that they will vote to overturn citizens' how much they're going to spend on the roads. Everyone raises their hand. It's called one person, one vote. That's what I believe in. But I also believe, from the bottom of my heart, that we have got to reinvent democracy in this country. It is not acceptable to me, and I hope to you, that in the last election, 63% of the American people did not vote. 80% of young people did not vote. So what we have got to do, in my view, is not just overturn this disastrous Citizens United decision, we have got to move toward public funding of elections. What we have today is a corrupt campaign finance system. And what I would like to see is people, working people, middle-class people, young people, who feel the desire, who want to run for public office, regardless of their political views. I want to see them be able to get involved in the political process without having to get down on their knees and beg wealthy people to get political. Some of these campaign finance reports coming out for the candidates, most candidates are in a situation where the super PACs controlled by the millionaires are raising more money and having more influence over the campaigns than the candidate himself or herself. That is not what American democracy is supposed to be about. Talk about American democracy. Our job is to make sure that as many people vote and participate in the political process, which is why we're going to fight this voter suppression, which goes on all over the country. When we talk about major issues, clearly one of the major issues we face is the reality that we live in a very competitive global economy. And for us to succeed, we need the best educated workforce in the world. And here is the absurd situation in which we are now living. In America today, there are hundreds of thousands of bright, young, qualified people. Young people who desperately want to go to college, who are qualified to go to college, but can't go to college because their family does not have enough money. That's wrong. Scientists and engineers and doctors and nurses are we losing because these bright kids can't get a college education only because their family lacks the funds. And that is why I have introduced legislation and will fight to implement it as president to make every public college and university tuition free. I want all of you to know that 45, 50 years ago, that was the case in the United States of America. And I want you to know that in Germany and in other countries, that is exactly what they do today. This is not a radical idea. What kind of radical idea is it to say that we want all of our people to get the best education they can? That makes our country stronger. That is not a radical idea. It's a common sense idea.
and they said, well, you know, Bernie, it's an interesting idea, but you know, it's an expensive proposition. And they're right. It is an expensive proposition. It's about $70 billion a year. And the way I'm going to pay for that is to put a tax on Wall Street speculation. Of this country bailed out Wall Street when they needed help. Now it is their time to help the billionaires. When we talk about major issues, it seems to me that as adults, as parents, my wife Jane and I have 4 kids and 7 grandchildren, that all of us as human beings have a moral responsibility to make certain that the planet we leave our children and grandchildren is habitable. The scientific community has spoken in a virtually unanimous voice. And what they have told us is that climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, it is already causing devastating problems in our country and around the world, and if we do not boldly and aggressively transform our energy system, the situation will get much worse. What they tell us is if we do not successfully combat climate change, that by the end of this century, the planet Earth will be between 5 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it is today. And that means more drought, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification of the ocean, more rising sea levels, and what the CIA and Department of Defense tell us is that if peoples around the world do not have the water they need, do not have the land they need to grow their crops, that reality will cause international conflict, a major national security issue. In my view, we must lead the world and work with other countries in transforming this planet's energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency. Our corrupt campaign finance system impacts climate change. As many of you know, almost all, not all, but almost all Republicans in Congress either deny the reality of climate change or the fact that it is caused by human activity. And they will tell you, well, I'm not a scientist, and I just really don't know. But this is what I do. And that is, if they were to come out and say, you know what, I've read the scientific evidence, we have got to do something about climate change. What I know will happen is the Koch brothers and ExxonMobil and all their big energy campaign funders will cut their campaign funding and force them into primaries. And that's how things are happening in Washington, D.C. today. Now, there's another issue I want to touch upon, and that is that the United States of America today is the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care as a right to all of their people.
provisions in the Affordable Care Act, but notwithstanding the Affordable Care Act, there are still 35 million Americans who do not have any health insurance, and even more who are underinsured with high co-payments and deductibles. In my view, the United States has got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care as a right to all people. And do it through a Medicare for all single-payer program. What I am asking of you is something that other candidates are not asking. And that is, yes, obviously I'm here to ask for your vote, but I need something much more. I'm the only candidate running for president who will tell you a very simple truth. And that truth is that no president, not Bernie Sanders, not anybody else, who gets elected today can bring about the changes that we need because of the unbelievable power of corporate America, Wall Street, the big campaign donors, and all of the lobbyists on Capitol Hill. The only way we bring about real change is to create a political revolution when millions of people stand together and say loudly and clearly that this country belongs to all of us. All of us. It belongs to that hungry kid in Texas. It belongs to that single mom in Vermont. It belongs to the postal worker in Connecticut. It belongs to all of us, and not just a handful of billionaires who now believe that this country simply belongs to them. So what I need from you, is to get involved in the political process in a way that we have never seen before. Now, our campaign is doing really, really good. We have hundreds of thousands of people who have made campaign contributions. You know what the average contribution is? $35. $35. Checks. We have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people participating. On July 29th, we are going to do well over 1,000 organizing meetings all over this country, and I hope we have many here in Texas. Go to my website and find out how to do it. Exactly the opposite of what the Republicans do. What the Republicans historically do, and they do it successfully, this is what they do. They divide whites from blacks. They divide men from women. They divide native-born Americans from immigrants. They divide straight people from gay people. That's how they win. Our job is to bring people together. have to take 11 million undocumented people in this country out of the shadows. That one of the great things, not only in the history of America, but throughout the world, this is not just an American problem, is racism. We started when Europeans came to this country and did horrible, horrible things to the Native Americans who were here. We followed that with the horror of slavery, followed that with discrimination against Asians and Italians and Irish and Jews and everybody else. It bothers me immensely that while we have made good progress, and we should not underestimate the progress that we have made, because let me tell you something, if we were here 20 years ago and somebody said, you know, I think in 2008, this country will have gone far enough in overcoming its racism to elect an African American as president. Very few people would have believed it, but we did it. We should be proud. We should be proud that increasingly we look at people based on, as Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us, not on the color of their skin or the country they came from, but on their character, on the quality of their lives. And I wish that in the year 2015 I could tell you that we have eliminated racism in this country, but you all know that is not true. You all know that you have heard remarks from a presidential candidate which are nothing less than racist with regard. And you are more than aware that Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, and many, many others going on decade after decade would be very, very wrong. And our job right now is to make it clear that it is unacceptable that police officers or anybody else act against the law, beat up people, or kill people. If they do that, they have got to be held accountable. We want police departments all over this country who are part of their communities, not perceived as oppressors in their communities. What I can tell you, having been a member, is that the vast majority of police officers work hard. It is a very, very difficult job. But like anybody else, if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. Let me conclude by saying this. As I mentioned earlier, we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And what that means is I want you guys to be thinking big, not just small. Don't get into this worldview of debating whether we cut education by 2% or 6%, whether we throw 3 million people off health care or 12 million people off health care. That is not the debate we should be having. The debate we should be having is how we create a country that works well for all of our people. We are such a poor country that we have got to cut benefits for our veterans, the men and women who put their lives on the line to defend us. We can live in a country, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, where every man, woman, and child has health care as a right. Where a mom and dad, when they go off to work, know that their little kid is in a pre-K program or a child care program which is of the highest quality. My Republican colleagues tell us that we should cut Social Security for the elderly and the disabled. I believe, and the American people believe, that we should expand Social Security. My Republican colleagues think we should give tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations. I think they should start paying their fair share of taxes. Absolutely true that the Koch brothers and the other billionaires have unlimited, and I use that word advisedly, unlimited sums of money to play with and put into the political process. On the other hand, we have something that they do not have. They may have the money, but we have the people. When we reach out to our neighbors and our friends and our co-workers, when we revitalize American democracy and get more people to be voting, when we stand together and not allow people to divide us by race or country of origin or sexual orientation or gender, when we stand together, there is nothing we cannot accomplish.